So Dav, you're a HERS Rater. I'm an installation contractor. Welcome to the first episode of my podcast. It's good to have you here.
Thank you.
So thanks for being here. So I've spent, thousands of hours sweating in attics, but I've never had a chance to sit down and unpack things with someone on your side of the equation. So what's one thing that you wish that every contractor actually understood about what you do, about your job, or homeowner for that matter?
I think one of the things that is really misunderstood is really probably a fundamental to most areas in that's what is the actual quality of something being done. And one of the reasons that the whole HERS industry was invented was to try and step up all of contractors' game and to encourage people, or sort of because we're part of a code, to mandate that people do better quality work. And it's a funny thing being a special inspector and trying after the fact come in and sort of say, well, this could be done better, and this could be done better, and this could be done better, which is one of the reasons why I've tried to move less from special inspections at the end of the project to more of a consulting role in the beginning and middle of a project to
Mm-hmm.
help guide people into making smarter decisions and, you know, making better choices before and during a construction project rather than illuminating the flaws at the end.
Yeah, it's so much easier to do that in the early stages of the project, at the design stage. Like the further you get into a project, closer to it being done, the harder it is to make those changes. And typically, I don't know about you, but for me, when these things get brought up with these QII projects, which we'll get into in a little bit, it's always, a lot of times seems to be at the last minute. It's hard to make those changes at that point. Okay, so
Absolutely.
yeah,
Whereas if you sit down at the beginning with sort of the whole build team, you can discuss through potentials. You can look at your blueprints and go, okay, what is the strategies that we can use to make things better in in all sorts of different realms? How do we make things more efficient just in the process, not
absolutely.
even looking at, is it going to get a higher score from a HERS test? And is the house going to be more efficient? Just in the actual construction process, the flow of things, there are little tricks of that I've seen implemented that make construction more helpful for different trades.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. So, okay, so you're a HERS rater. So for the people that might not know, what does HERS actually stand for? Is it his and hers?
It is definitely not his and hers.
Okay.
It actually stands for a home energy rating system. And that in itself, I wish it were as simple as the words and sort of the name is, because in California, HERS was taken in a different direction than virtually every other state in the union.
Mm,
Um, Oddly, there is a national system for HERS rating, which uses a HERS score on energy efficiency, looking basically where a zero is the perfect net zero energy home, where you don't need energy inputs to keep the home comfortable. It produces its own energy, and that's enough to keep it comfortable year round. Or 100, which is takes a lot of outside inputs to make the home energy efficient, right? You need
okay.
to be connected to the grid in order to run air conditioners, in order to run your hot water, in order to run everything in the house, and to thus live our comfortable life.
Okay.
That's a HERS rating for the rest of the country. California had something like that, but then took it in another direction and basically created a special heating and heating and air conditioning inspection regimen, which has been called in California HERS rating, where we special inspectors are only mostly looking at, or had been mostly looking at, heating and air conditioning systems and doing a couple of functional tests on those systems to determine how energy efficient are they. Do the ducts, for example, leak air into the building cavities or into the attic, so that when a air conditioner is running, it produces cold air, and then you get cold air in the attic rather than 100% of that air coming into
Right.
the house.
Yeah.
So
So many attics
really,
I've been into, you can put your hand, the back of your hand against that duct and feel the cold air coming back into the attic.
exactly, which is great for all of the mice that live in the attic. They
Yeah.
have really wonderful conditioned space. Not so good for the homeowner who's paying up through the nose for either Edison or LADWP power to thus air condition a space that they don't live in.
Right. Yeah.
Um,
So, yeah.
and then it has expanded over the years for some special inspections, and this is probably how we got together, where they've taken the air conditioning and also looked at something you had mentioned earlier, QII, quality insulation installation inspection. So it really could be QIII. Um, and that's where I, as a special inspector, look at what is the quality, how has the installation contractor put the insulation up? And there are a lot of variables to that. Interestingly, not even mentioned in quality insulation in installation is actually a step that's really critical that comes first, and that has to do with air sealing a space.
Okay.
And
Break
that
that down.
really occurs in framing before insulation even gets applied to a house.
Okay. So could you give some specific examples about how that would be done if they're to do it properly?
So, yeah, sure. One of the things that helps slow down air movement through a dwelling, someone's house, is by making sure that the outside sheeting is all glued closed. And it's
Okay.
basically
So when you
kind of
say,
like,
so when you say outside sheeting, you're talking just for the lay person, you're saying the plywood that goes attached to the wall studs and the plywood that gets installed. Well, specifically, you're talking about the walls, right?
that's good. Well, it's the walls and interestingly, either the ceiling or the roof, if it's a cathedral home, and
Okay.
the flooring underneath, or the
Okay.
slab. And yes, that's so it's predominantly walls, and it also then could be either the ceiling drywall and or the roof sheeting and the flooring sheeting, the plywood on the floor.
Okay.
And someone had once given me a great analogy for the importance of a really good envelope sheeting. And that is, when you're outside and you have a jacket on, what kind of jacket is it? Is it like a fleece thing, or is it a kind of like a Gore-Tex windbreaker? Or is it something that has both of those? Because if you want air to not move through a material, it needs to obviously be a solid air barrier, like a sheet of wood. If you put holes in it, it's obviously not going to stop air movement. If you're wearing a sweater jacket or a fleece, air can pass through that material. If you're wearing a rain slicker or a Gore-Tex coat, air can't move through it. So on a windy day, it's a great windbreaker. But when it's freezing cold outside, it's not really going to do anything. When it's 0 degrees outside and you have your windbreaker on, you're going to still freeze. And so that really is looking at the difference between insulation and air movement,
That's a great
and the
analogy.
importance of an air stop and the importance of material to keep you insulated. So a
Okay.
fleece is really good insulation, but a terrible air barrier. But a slicker is a great air barrier, but terrible insulator.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
And so when building a house, it's important to start with the air barrier, make sure that's all tight, and then come in and do a really good job of insulating. And there are things that I look for, particularly in that, and I have some other analogies in how to sort of the difference in insulation techniques that is really material independent.
Okay. What are some common things that you will see people miss? Like, what's a really common reason QAI inspection will fail? I know one that I've read in the what is it, the Cal Certs book, where I know one that I saw that I see people miss all the time is if they have an exterior wall and there's an interior wall that intersects, there's going to be a framing channel on this side. There's a little void that doesn't have insulation. If you don't insulate that before the sheathing goes up or air seal that, is that one of the things you'll see happen a lot?
There, it's really funny because unfortunately, it's almost an endless list of things where
Yeah,
people miss.
yeah,
Because so frequently, for for virtually every um oh gosh, brain fart. When sheeting is applied early for structure, it's a it's important to insulate before that sheeting goes on, but oftentimes that's never inspected.
mm,
And
yeah,
so and so you have areas that don't even get looked at, and people just kind of throw insulation up, or they smash it into a corner and hope for the best. Insulation is so um, malleable that it is so easy to be misshapen. And one of the issues that I have with insulation, particularly fiberglass bats, no matter where they're put up, is that they miss little gaps everywhere. And so you were sort of mentioning a common gap between where walls join, but literally everywhere that fiberglass bats get into a corner, are they really filling that corner? And that's one of the reasons why I'm actually not a big fan of a fiberglass bat as a insulation material, but I really push for loose fill insulation. And whether it's fiberglass or cellulose or anything else, I like that every nook and cranny gets filled. And if
yeah,
you were to take a fine tooth comb and go through a house from floor to ceiling, from right to left, there is just an endless array of areas where insulation is not touching 360 degrees around. Every single light socket, every single electrical outlet box almost uniformly has areas of insulation that don't touch 100% around. And so one of the analogies that, as I mentioned before, that I really like is if someone is staying overnight in a mountain cabin, and the mountain cabin has really, let's say it doesn't even have a heater in it, but all the beds are provided with a really thick down comforter. And one crawls into bed and it's freezing cold, but after a few moments, your body heat will warm up the bed, and so you're nice and snugly comfortable. But if I come in with a couple friends and I pick up that comforter an inch off of you and an inch off of the edge of the bed, what is going to happen pretty quickly?
Freezing cold, yeah.
Air is going to seep into that little crack that's just an inch big or even a half an inch big and freeze you. And that's exactly what happens in millions of points everywhere in a house where there's no insulation. And there's no insulation because maybe the insulation bat has just folded over or gotten crinkled or is pulled out of whack due to an electrical box or a light switch box or a support rod from an overhead light or a plumbing fixture or a plumbing pipe. Like I said before, there are basically 1,000 different places. No, almost 100,000 different individual areas in a house where the insulation is going to be left with a hole.
Yeah. And also it seems to be that the more times the house has been remodeled, the more the framing gets moved around, the more regular shaped cavities are. Really, it's a huge, right? It's a huge difference with the padding on those types of homes.
Absolutely, for sure. And everywhere a bat does not touch 100% of a surface, you're leaving that gap for cold air to run or hot air to run, depending on what you're trying to keep. Are you trying to keep a cold indoors? Or are you trying to keep a hot indoors? And interestingly, most attics run, it's the hottest or the greatest temperature difference of a house between an attic and the living space. And so every insulation flaw is most critically felt in between the attic and the living space, even
Mm,
more than the wall and the living space or the floor in the living space, because according to complicated physics phenomenon, the higher the temperature difference between point A and point B, the faster the heat will flow to it.
mm,
And so if you have the difference between 70 and 130, that will move very quickly versus 90 to 70. It will move more slowly.
right.
And
So if
so
you, yeah, go ahead.
I'm just saying a sunny wall will bleed air more slowly than a sunny or bleed the temperature drain more slowly than a sunny attic.
Okay. So if you were to put, let's put some numbers to this. Between batting and loose fill for like, let's say an attic or a wall, I've heard people say that it's somewhere between maybe 35 to 40% more effective for loose fill. Would you agree with that, generally speaking?
No and yes.
Okay.
Yes, there is a difference, but it's actually a 60 to 70% difference.
Wow.
Lawrence Berkeley Labs and the federal government has done a number of tests on actual installed R values versus rated R values. And as a HERS inspector, I derate bat insulation by, as a rule of thumb, 60%.
Wow.
And derating means that it is discounting it by a very large factor. And so that is the reason why now in consulting, I will never, ever recommend someone use a bat for an installed product if they can avoid it.
Right. And by the way, price wise, as an insulation contractor, it's not that much more expensive to do this net and blow system or blown in blanket system where you staple the netting and blow the insulation into the walls, or a loose fill. The price difference is really not much. And in fact, for an attic, it's going to be slightly less expensive, you know?
And and why, I mean, I can see why people would choose a bat. It's much easier to manipulate. It's easier to go back into that attic surface
Yeah.
and not get covered in this nasty snow.
That's true. Yeah, especially if they got to do a rewire, or if we're talking about a house that's already been built and I know they have to do a plumbing repipe or they have to do a rewire at some point. I will explain the difference to them and let them make their own decision. But that's really the only advantage it has is the accessibility.
For sure. But in all of my education and my field work that I've looked at, the fact that bats have a derating value of no less than 60%, and sometimes they can be up to 70. And sometimes I honestly think that the installation is so awful, I derate it 90%.
Yeah, like
And then
tract
it's just
homes.
floating above the rafters.
Yeah.
You you can't say that just because you have an R30 that really is touching no surface, it's not really doing anything. And so, yeah, loose fill insulation is huge. Now, there is another bat object which is sometimes done, and those are oftentimes for sound. The Oh, come on, I'm having quite a number of I'm talking about
Are
the
you talking about
farm.
mineral wool or rock wool?
Yes,
Yeah.
mineral wool, rock wool bats.
Okay.
Exponentially better than a soft fiberglass bat because it retains its shape. But now you need to have a master craftsman
Yeah.
saw those up
Yeah.
so that they are beautifully fitting into the cavity.
And also splitting around electrical wiring and stuff like that is a bit more, it's trickier. It's more time consuming to do it properly, and these are the things that people don't notice or know about, when I try to explain these things to them, it's.
Absolutely. So a rock wool bat or a mineral wool bat is a far superior thing to get an effective, and I emphasize this, effective R value in a house versus a fiberglass bat. But even a mineral wool bat, I will discount that to kind of what you say is a 20 to 30% below what a blown in blanket, loose fill, dense packet in kind of experience, because that guarantees 100% coverage as long as they're not doing a horrible flaky job where they're
Right.
not actually packing the cavity. And that happens. There are many contractors that need to make sure that their line crews are doing quality work
Yeah.
because, like everything, quality is important. And you can back a bay, and if it's not really fully packed, it will settle, and then a line will be left above where it will not have insulation.
Yeah. That's why I invested in getting a blowing machine that has a PSI gauge on it, pressure and air pressure gauge, especially if we're doing like retrofit wall stuff. We're in that, tolerance. But even then, you're still working blind and you got to use like an infrared camera and okay, so we're running out of time. We got about 9 minutes left. I wanted to shift gears, and you mentioned attic ventilation, and I've personally, having a background in roofing and installing attic insulation, I know the difference pretty well between a well-ventilated attic and not. And I want to ask you what your experience has been because I see people that they mess up the intake ventilation a lot. People don't know what baffles are, or the roofing contractor won't install intake ventilation. So how do you feel about a vented attic? What are your thoughts on that?
It would be great if people actually had properly vented attics, and they don't, because as you clearly pointed out, intake ventilation is so often missed. Everybody looks at the attic and they see the outflow, the exhaust ventilation, and go, oh, yeah, the attic is ventilated. But if you don't have air flowing into the attic, you're not going to have airflow flowing out of the attic. And that it is really obvious that airflow should come in from the bottom of the attic and out the top. And having vents that are just toward the top of the attic is not properly actually working completely.
Yeah.
And so it is really important to have, I believe it's almost 60% low ventilation to 40% high ventilation in order to create that upflow phenomenon where it's flushing cooler air in, it's sucking cooler air in and exhausting hot air out of the attic.
Yeah, if you read like the roofing shingle manufacturers' books on how to install it, they say that, they say right at the top, the attic ventilation is the most widely misunderstood part of roofing. And I'm in Southern California, and we can kind of you can technically quote unquote get away with it, where there's no obvious symptoms on the roof. You're paying for it every month with utilities, but in other climates where you have ice and snow, if you get that wrong, you're going to have ice dams, you're going to have hot spots, and it's a big deal.
Absolutely. And that's why, interestingly, Southern California construction has really devolved to the lowest common denominator because it's such a forgiving environment.
Yeah, absolutely.
When it is 0 degrees outside and people have an ice dam that is thus going to split their roof apart, people become more conscious than just wasting money in, Edison or DWP.
Okay,
But
so
the
yeah.
same phenomenon is absolutely happening in both places.
Oh yeah, you're paying for it either way. And we get days out here where it's 115 plus on some days of the year. And so, okay, what do you wish more contractors and homeowners knew before they pick up a phone to call a HERS Rater?
Why they have to go through our torturous process.
Okay.
Um, that it's we should not be seen as the end, quality, but we should be seen as a partner with you in trying to make your house as comfortable and least expensive to operate as it can be,
Yeah.
and how we can help you lower your bills and give you a comfortable product to live in.
Because over the lifetime of a home, that's the second greatest expense is your mortgage and then your utility bills. You're gonna have that forever. So if you invest that time up front at the design phase, call the HERS Rater at the beginning and the installation contractor, get that sorted out, get everybody on the same page, you're gonna at the end of the day save a lot more money and have a lot more comfortable home by doing that.
Absolutely. If a house is built properly, and that's what, there are certain organizations which are taking this really to the nth degree, something like Passive Home California, where they're basically trying to encourage people to have zero utility bills. If you have a home that is built for the environment in which it is, you can cut your utility bills down to peanuts. If you look at all of the little places that energy is wasted and plug all those holes up. And when people do major remodels, right, a gut remodel, or they build from scratch, that is the best opportunity to take to build a house that has no utility bills.
Okay. Cool. All right. Well, it's been really good talking with you, and I've picked up some things myself here. And so if somebody wants to find you, if they want to find your service, how can they find you?
I have two different websites in how to find me. One is HERS Rater LA, HERSRATERLA.com. And that's mostly for people that need after construction inspections. And I also another website that is focused on, construction consulting, and that's House Smart Green Solutions, HOUSEMARTGREENSOLUTIONS, House Smart Green Solutions. And I've actually bought a little bit shorter one, housesmartgs.com, and that will take you to my website. And that's
Okay.
the easiest way to find out more information about me.
Okay, great. Dav, good talking with you, man, and appreciate it. And I'll talk to you later. Thanks for being on
Thank
the
you so
podcast.
much for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you.